Hello and welcome to the California Adult Ed Program Guide or Guidance Overview. So today's webinar or overview will cover the program guidance for the California Adult Ed Program. And that guidance is listed on the website, and we'll get into all that. We'll go section by section. I don't think I'll necessarily cover every specific detail, but highlight the important stuff. And by the way, this is Neil Kelly with the CAEP program. I'm the one you would talk to on a day-to-day basis regarding policy and things like that. So I'm base of CAEP, and CAP helps handle all the questions and technical assistance needs, and I work with them. So if you're just new to this program, you might be contacting TAP initially, and then if it's something policy or fiscal related, that might get passed on to me, or TAP could handle it. So get familiar with the website, get familiar with working with TAP, and we'll go through the guide today. There's other webinars on legislation, on fiscal management, and there's an onboarding tool, so all this is very helpful. Hopefully, we're going to make this a smooth transition if you're new to the program. So with that, let's go to the first slide. So what I tell everyone when they come into the program is get familiar with the Ed Code. So the Ed Code was part of AB 104, the legislation that enabled the California Adult Ed program, and provides funding for all the members and regional consortia. And so in the Education Code, it's section 84900 to 84920. There's various sections that cover how we administer the program, what you're responsible for, what are the requirements. And so we have a link here, and we also have a webinar detailing this, kind of going over each section in the Ed Code. I would suggest, and this is on the website, if you go to administrator/governance and then go to legislation, you can find the Ed Code there. So this link will also take you to the Education Code site. So with that said, let's get into the program guidance. So this is a document that talks about everything from procedures and timelines, reporting requirements for what AB 104, the legislation called the Adult Ed Block Grant, to change the name to the California Adult Ed Program, CAEP. And so now we refer to CAEP. So if you hear me referring to CAEP, it was the same thing as AEBG, but it's not a grant anymore. It's ongoing funding, so that's why we took block grant out of the title and called it California Adult Ed Program. So the AB 104 language, the Ed Code, is rather prescriptive, and so the guidance that we have in the program guide is an interpretation and clarification of the legislature's direction or the legislation. So if you want to look at this overview or find the complete program guidance, there's a link to the file. And this has been updated in the last month here for the 1920 program year. There's 11 sections, so let's get into it. And remember, I'm not going to go detail line item by line item. I'm just going to give you the highlights. If something is very important that I want you to pay attention to, I will go into a little bit of detail. So this first part, part two, because I think part one is kind of an introduction, part two of the guide talks about the state level governance. And so just so you know, the California Department of Education and the Community College Chancellor's Office with the State Board of Education and now the Governor's Office, Director of Immigration, all work together, and they're responsible for understanding the needs of adults And using the powers outlined in the Ed Code that I mentioned previously, the legislation, to support effective provision of services to address those needs. And so that requires us to work together at the state agency level, and that's what we've did to roll out kind of a formula funding, provide structure on what are the requirements to submit, whether it's planning documents, whether it's student data, whether it's fiscal data, and so we'll get a little bit into that. Part 3 is state level. State would be CDE and the Chancellor's Office for regional consortia. So when this program started, the Chancellor and Superintendent sat down and their staff and divided the state into adult education regions and approved one consortia per region. So we based this on the community college districts. There's 72 districts. There's 71 consortia, and the reason there's a difference is down in San Jose, 2 consortia combined into one consortium. So that's why there's 71 rather than 72. Each consortium is required to approve rules and procedures for decision-making and governance and things like that. And there's a document that you have to complete showing that, submitting that to the state. And then as a condition of receipt of funds, you're required to submit an approved adult ed plan. And there's 3 levels of planning. We have a 3-year plan, which of course is due every 3 years. And every year we have an annual plan based on that 3-year plan. And then once that annual plan is approved, each member develops a work plan and budget based on that annual plan, based on that 3-year plan. So it cascades down to the member level, district level, actually into the classroom. So the state used, I think, 6 determining factors on the funding. These were economic and demographic factors for regional labor markets. The boundaries, of course, are the community college district boundaries. And we do have language in there about demonstrating effectiveness. So those, if you're, I don't know if I have this on a slide, but those 6 areas were population, poverty, ESL, meaning language spoken at home, high school diploma, adult population, and employment or unemployment. So those were the 6 factors if you're wondering what that formula, that needs-based formula is. Because this isn't a seat time formula, it's not ADA, it's not SPS. It is a needs-based formula that we used census data and community survey data to figure out how much we should allocate for each region, those 71 regions. So this is important to remind you, state-level requirements for consortium membership. So really, there's members and then there's partners. And partners can be adult education providers. But only members are the following. So you can have a member being a community college district. You can have a member being a K-12 school district. You can have a member being a county office of education. Or you can have a member being a, this is joint powers, but it's Joint Powers Authority, JPA. And so that's it. Those are the members, and those members are the ones that make decisions. So if you have other partners or providers like workforce boards, libraries, community-based organizations, social services, they can't be members. But they can be partners, and they can come to meetings, and we'll talk about how to get public input and get input from your adult ed providers. But one of the requirements for a member is to share funding that they receive in addition to the CAEP funds. And so that's why it says here, shall be a member of a consortium if they receive funds from any of the following programs or allocation. adults in correctional facilities, WIOA Title II, Perkins funding, local control formula funding, non-credit apportionment, and CalWORKS funding. And so just the Adults in Correction Facilities program, those are funds that come from CDE. So there wouldn't be correctional money, it wouldn't be jail money from the county, it would have to come from CDE. So we collect this information in NOVA, and so that's done on an annual basis, the program area reporting. So just so you get the connection there. Let's go on to the next section. So this is a rather lengthy section, part 5. It's consortium member requirements. So I'm not going to spend too much time. I could spend a couple hours on this, but there are 16 member requirements that we list. And just remember that just because you're a member, that doesn't guarantee funding. We have I think 90, at last count we have 90 members that don't receive any funding, but they are part of the decision-making process. They are a member of the consortia, but they might not be offering programs, and so they're not receiving any funds. And that's okay, but they are required to be at meetings and make decisions. So that's the caveat. Okay, so here are the requirements. So the first one, and we just kind of went over there, a member will report any funds available to them for the purposes of adult education and workforce services, and those were those 6 funds. And then the 7th one would be CAEP, of course. So that's in section 4 that we just went through. A member is represented by an official designated by the governing board. So a member is represented by an officially designated person by the governing board. The language is a little goofy there. So that means your local district governing board, when somebody goes to represent at the consortia, because consortia is a kind of a legal entity in the state size, that you have to get official designation by your governing board. And so those minutes should probably be kept on file by the consortia because you can't have someone that's not officially designated making decisions for the board. And the way the decision-making works is that person is representing the board. So when you go to vote at your consortia, they can't say, oh, I got to go check with my board. No, they're the person making the decision for the board. So that decision is final when it's voted on. You can't go back to your district. That's why having the official designated person is very important. And then as a condition of receipt of apportionment, the members must have an approved adult plan, and it's a 3-year plan. The members will approve an adult plan at least once every 3 years, and it will be updated at least once a year. So the once a year is the annual plan. All the members in the consortium will participate in any decisions made by the consortium. So that gets back to the official designated member. And so you must, as part of a member, as part of a consortium member, you must be there to participate in decision making. Also, there is a requirement. There are decision-making requirements in the Ed Code for this program, but because we are a regional body, we do have to follow Brown Act. And so we do have some resources on the website regarding Brown Act, but you can always check with your local district legal counsel of how they follow Brown Act, because it's interpreted differently around the state of how people follow Brown Act. So each district's a little different. So that would be something your consortium would have to agree upon, how you're going to follow Brown Act for public meetings, how you're accepting comments, how you're noticing the public that you're having a meeting. That gets into number 7, and this is in the Ed Code. The consortium has provided the public with adequate notice of proposed decisions and considered any comments submitted by members of the public been distributed publicly. Consortia number 8 has requested comments regarding our proposed decisions from the entity located in the adult ed region that provides education workforce services. So there's a lot of requirements around public comment, including 9 and 10, that were added in trailer bill language. So you have to consider comments submitted by education workforce services, public agencies, departments, public safety, social services, workforce investment, boards, libraries, community-based organizations. Those are all those partners, those providers that aren't necessarily members, but you still got to get their input. And then number 10 is, in addition to that, you also have to provide a mechanism for input by students, by teachers, by faculty, by principals, administrators, classified staff, and local bargaining units of the district, whether it's school district or community college district, before you make a decision. So now we get into kind of the fiscal stuff. We talked about number 11, decision is final, meaning a consortium decision cannot be held up because an official member failed to attend or didn't feel comfortable making that decision for the district. They are the official rep. Also, members of the consortium may designate a member to serve as a fund administrator, which we call a fiscal agent. The members have an option of selecting direct funding, which means not having a fiscal agent and having the money go directly to the district. So we have a process and a timeline for you to decide that, and that's submitted when you submit your allocation schedule, which we call a CFAD. And number 13 kind of talks about the CFAD. As a condition of receipt of the apportionment from the program, a consortium shall approve a distribution schedule, which we call a CFAD, that includes the amount of funds to each member for the fiscal year, and it also includes a narrative, which is part of the process for the CFAD, and then we also have a narrative in the AEBG, or what we call a CAEP, annual plan, justifying how planned allocations are consistent with the adult education plan. So it's kind of a combination of the CFAD and the annual plan. So those are all required part of the fiscal and planning process. They all kind of go together. We look at the last three. The chancellor and the superintendent may require a consortia, which we do, to submit reports or data necessary to produce a report described in the subdivision of reporting to the legislature. So what we require, if you're a K-12 or county office, you're required to use TOPS Pro and report your student data quarterly. So you would have to, if you're new, check to make sure your members are in contact with their K-12 or county office members, if they have a site license, if they have a reporting ID for TOPS Pro, which is through CASA, and our technical assistance provider, TAP, can help you with that. If you're a college, you would be using your MIS system that feeds into the chancellor's MIS system. You'd have to make sure all your technical specifications, flags, and codes are up to date. So your local system for MIS is reporting to the state MIS system. So that's for the colleges. We also have common measures for determining effectiveness of members and meeting the needs. So we have 6 metrics that we use, along with additional requirements that mirror our federal program. So there's instructional hours and things like that that we have in the beginning of the year letter, and we have training on throughout the year. We have in-person workshops that you can attend that dive deep into the data collection process. And then lastly, consortium and their members must agree to adhere to the general assurances listed as part of the annual planning process for purposes of evaluating consortia and consortium member effectiveness. CDE and the Chancellor's Office establish annual indicators of compliance. Failure to meet the requirements may result in determination of noncompliance and lead to partial or complete loss of funds. So that's if you don't follow these requirements. And there's a lot of detail behind these requirements, but I wanted to make sure you knew that these were the kind of foundational requirements for operating in the California Adult Ed program. So moving on to Section 6. So there is a process for reducing a member's funds. So without going into this detail, if a member says, you know, oh, I'm not going to be able to spend these funds this year, let's reallocate them to another member, that's fine. If the member agrees, you don't need to, you know, adhere to the ed code as long as everybody's willing to do that. There has to be, you know, 100% consensus in the consortium of all the members, like, okay, we're going to move these funds from this member to this member. Is everybody okay with that? And if everybody gives it a thumbs up, because they have to go into NOVA and certify that they're okay with that. If somebody isn't okay with that, they can block that by not certifying in NOVA. So if they block that, then this is the ed code that you would have to use to override somebody that is not okay with reducing a member's funding. So it says there are specific circumstances outlined in legislation regarding when a consortium can reduce funding to a member. Unless one of the findings listed below is made regarding the member for which distribution would be reduced. And so here are the three areas. One, the member no longer wishes to provide services consistent with the adult education plan. You would go back to the plan. The member says, yeah, I know we're going to do this over that 3-year period. Or in the annual plan, I know we said we were going to do this. I just can't do it. We can't provide those services. Or maybe the consortium realizes that the member can no longer provide these services consistent with the plan. And that would be number 2B, the member cannot provide services that address the needs identified in the adult ed plan. So both of those, one, the member no longer wishes, that's a lot easier. So that's, you know, they're consenting that you no longer wish. The other one, the member could say that I can't provide it, or the consortium could identify that they cannot provide services that address the needs of the plan. And then you could reduce or move that funding to another member. The last one is a little sensitive, I would say. It says the member has been ineffective in providing services that address the needs identified in the adult ed plan, and reasonable interventions have not resulted in improvement. So what that would require is in your governance and bylaws or charter, whatever you use to run your consortia, you would really have to define what ineffective is in providing services that address the needs identified in the adult ed plan. So you should have some agreed upon effectiveness to provide services that address the needs identified in the adult ed plan. And if a member doesn't meet those, I mean, that could be specific metrics, that could be data. It's what you guys agree upon at the local level as far as effectiveness. Because we collect, you know, we collect the number of students served, we collect how many hours of instruction, we collect how many students get into our outcome pool, we collect outcomes in 6 areas. So any number of that can be used for determining effectiveness, or the consortium can agree on something else. But even if you identify that ineffectiveness, you still have to do some reasonable intervention to try to get them back on track. So whether that's contacting TAP, to schedule some PD, doing some in-house intervention, bringing in a consultant, those kind of things, contacting, you know, the state, et cetera, et cetera. And after those reasonable interventions you've tried, and it hasn't resulted in an improvement, then you can move those funds around. But just remember, there's a short time span you have, because right now we have a target of spending those funds in 24 months. With a corrective action plan, you can extend that an extra 6 months to 30 months. But, you know, if a member is going to be ineffective, you have to start this process early. And so I would think about that if you're running your consortia. At what point do you start evaluating for effectiveness? And then if someone's not doing what they said they were going to do, or can't, you know, provide the services, or no longer wishes to provide the services, or is not showing to be effective, it takes some time to move that money around. So that's why you got to build in some leeway to have that done, and then processed in NOVA. And NOVA is the one that you would move the funds around, and you'd have to get everybody certified, and those kind of things. And probably contact the state if you are going to invoke this part of the legislation for reducing a member's. So that's an interesting part. We'll move on to number 7, or part 7. Here's the language actually in the legislation. So I don't want to get into it too much, but you can review that if you want. But it just talks about reducing members' funds, and if the governor gives us more money or less money, what's the reduction, those kind of things. So I guess the key thing to remember here is, as a member, you get no less than you did in the prior year. And so, and so when the governor, let's say the governor had 500 million, and then they increased it to 520 million. You still get, and that was, the 500 million was in the prior year. So you get the same amount as you did in the prior year under that 500 million. So the increase would have to be decided among the consortium members of how you wanted to do that. But at least you get, it says equal or greater than the prior fiscal year. So that would be at least a safeguard to know you're getting the same amount every year. So if there's an increase, you have to have bylaws and governance to determine what you do with the increase. And so that has been a little bit problematic for some consortia because they have to vote on that. And some aren't in agreement, some want more than their share, and some vote in voting blocks. It doesn't happen a lot, maybe a few cases like that, but this is something to be aware of. Now, we haven't had less than the prior year, but what would happen if we had less, if we had a cut, then we would do a percentage based on the total funds allocated to the consortia decrease. So if there was a 5% cut, there would be a 5% cut in the amount of funds allocated to the consortia, that kind of thing. So moving on into 7. So here's the planning. We kind of talked about this. So you're required to submit a 3-year plan, a governance plan, an annual plan, which includes the CFAD and the annual plan. And so there's a schedule of how these things are, when these things are due. So I would just get familiar with that. But a lot of planning. And this doesn't even include the, after the annual plan is due in August, in September, each member is required to complete a work plan and budget for that year. You know, showing where they're going to spend funds, how it aligns, how the work plan aligns with the annual plan. The annual plan aligns with the 3-year plan, so everybody's kind of headed in the same direction. Part 8 talks about program areas. And so reporting data, we have a beginning of the year letter that talks about how we report student data. We do have program guidance further clarifying definitions. And on the website, we do have more specific data on if you're reporting through TOPS Pro, if you're a K-12 or county office, or if you're reporting through community college MIS reporting. We do provide, like I said, a lot of training, a lot of information in this area. So here are the 7 program areas. So you can't use funding outside of these program areas. Now, students are transitioning from these program areas. You can help with that transition. And so And it's not just limited to instruction. You can also provide services. You can provide supports, so supportive services, transitional services, training services. All that stuff is allowed in these program areas. So if you had a student that wasn't enrolled in these program areas and you wanted to serve them, you couldn't do that. So we're specific to, and this is K-12 adult ed and community college non-credit only. Now, community college non-credit has other non-credit program areas that aren't listed here. You cannot use CAEP funds in those program areas for non-credit that aren't listed here. And that would be the same on the K-12 side. There are some like home economics, health and safety, those kind of things that aren't listed here. Older adults, specific classes for older adults are not listed in the program area. Parenting specifically is not listed, but they do have a program for adults, but primarily designated to develop knowledge and skills to assist elementary and secondary school children to succeed academically in school. So that's kind of like parenting, but for parents of elementary and secondary school children. So let's see, and the one called Program for Adults, number 3, including but not limited to older adults that are primarily related to entry or workforce entry or entry into the workforce. We call that workforce entry, re-entry, but we're kind of interpreting starting this year as workforce prep. And so it aligns better with workforce prep programs that are offered around the state for this population. And so although the legislation hasn't changed on the description, we are reinterpreting number 3 as workforce prep. So hopefully that makes sense. And then if you want to go outside of these program areas and serve students, you can, but you just can't use the CAEP funds. So if you wanted, you have some high school students that are under 18 that are still connected, or over 18 that are still connected to the high school or short credits, credit recovery, you can serve them, but you can't serve them with CAEP funds. You'd have to get some other fund source that's allowable to do these things that you wanted to do. But we're okay with using other non-CAEP funds. And that would be the same for, serving older adults and health and safety and those other programs that aren't listed in CAEP. You can still serve those adults, but you can't use the CAEP funds to do that. And you can find other fund sources to do that. And then course approval, there is course approval for K-12 and county offices through CDE. And then there is a course approval process at the Chancellor's office. So any kind of program you're going to offer or courses, if you're using CAEP funds, you have to adhere to the course approval process set up by the state agency. You also have to have the appropriate teacher credentialing. So on the K-12 side, that would be through the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. On the community college side, that would be the minimum qualifications under the community college regulations, Title V. So you would have to follow that as well. And number 10 is that state reporting that the state has to do. So when you submit all your data quarterly, and you submit your data at the end of the year, we take that information and we give the legislation or legislature a preliminary report at the end of October with partial data, and then we, for the previous year, and then it's actually March 1st. I think it still says February 1st in the legislation, but we just do data needs. We just can't meet that timeline, but we do the prior year complete data set along with outcomes and transition data and things like that. That goes to the legislature in the beginning of March. And so here are the things that the Ed Code asks for: a summary of the adult ed plan for each consortia, distribution schedule for each consortia, which is the funding, types and levels of services, effectiveness in meeting the needs of adults in the respective region, and any recommendations. And then section 11, this refers to all the stuff that we talked about, the metrics and the data and accountability reporting, you know, your student data numbers, your outcomes. So we have all kinds of information on that. And like I said, we do workshops, webinars, have documents, and we also have on the front page of the website, we have a little reporting tool document that can take you through the whole world of CAEP reporting. And so that's very helpful. And let's see, updates. So we just kind of updated the program guidance. When we do update that, we announce it in the newsletter. So it's pretty much up to date. If we do plan on doing any other updates, you'll be notified. And so hopefully, let's see if there's another slide. Oh, to learn more, here are some links. And there's a lot of good information on the website. You can use the search engine, or you can click on these links for the fiscal management guide, or you can go to the Q&A section and pull up so many different Q&As that come in. We have questions and responses on a variety of topics that you can search on your own and find information out. So TAP has set up a really thorough question and answer process or documentation where whenever anybody asks a question, we document that and update our questions and answers on the website. So feel free to use that as a resource. And I think that might be it. So if you do have follow-up questions, I suggest you contact TAP, and they have a new email address. Let me just get that for you very quickly. It is let's see, caladulted.org. Let's see what the email address. Sorry, I'm sorry. That's the website, but the email address is tap@caladulted.org, and you can submit your request through that. And I hope this has been enjoyable or worth your while. But yeah, we do many other webinars. Just look on the website, and you can follow along. And so I appreciate you hanging in there, going through the program guidance. Not as exciting, but it is a lot of good information if you're new to the adult ed world, whether at the member level or at the consortia level. So with that, we'll close, and good luck, and hopefully we will see you at an upcoming conference or on a webinar or in a workshop. So have a great day, and good luck.